will start on
Yeah.
E5, then try 5,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to yeah, and then basically just
Yeah, it's just
2
really
pages.
exactly, not even that.
Yeah, that would be good.
You know, no, we just was. So, don't you think
Where
that's
is that?
the
Yeah. You need to start with that.
because I think it's
Oh,
quite
yeah,
a,
this one.
it shows kind of the, how much is on there.
Yeah, I'll get another marker for that. See that, here's a footnote, it shows all the expeditions in one, and then you can use that as a bookmark. That's great.
There's an often we get from CY meetings.
Page 205. I'm actually starting with that one and then I'll go to
Good.
Yeah, I actually saw something in person.
Really?
Yeah, it's like something.
Sylvia Brown.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing? Good. It's a busy day for you.
Yes, it is.
Two readings on the day. Very
Oh my
nice.
God, I was gonna say, there's my actually see that here.
Actually, I got everything, I'm just gonna talk about
I've never
it.
heard of her. What would be the thing, what would be the thought of how fancy her Charlie Rose?
Yeah. I have to admit it, when I published it, they said, oh, it's just friends and family. I don't know. Just see what kind of games you're reading it, but
Right.
yeah, it's just, because every time I heard it, it's better and better. Who's this guy? Yeah. It's lucky when it works out.
Yeah.
For us, visit Vulcan, the main Danish publishers. Even though I'm traveling over there, I'm probably not gonna have permission to go to this one, so.
At first I thought this was like,
No, I was just gonna email and send them a call and say, hey, I'm in, but you know, you're probably not gonna be a publisher. Just to never actually get a foot in there.
We should, because I have been reading about that. Like,
That would be great. The thing,
well,
the thing with Denmark is that one person never issues a grade. So,
it looks like,
and the only active dog sledding patrol is the surf.
they're all weird little sandy hills.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's good. I forget what it was. I think,
I'm tempted to buy this book because it would be a really great source of news.
You know, when I was, as a child.
at least actually some of those, a lot of the folks in Denmark prefer to be going around green. So, simply, I think simply just actually handle international publishing.
I know, extreme.
Publishers
Strange puzzle.
it's manifesting out.
Yeah, it's faster than I thought.
That just throws me for you. Anyway, I was thinking, right, Pulp Fiction is all.
Yeah.
I just want to.
Actually, God, my aunt. So my whole plan was to look out after sushi. And I realized I didn't actually have any sheets. So, it wasn't just spam.
That would be one thing.
I tried to hear about that.
I would like to as well. It's the best thing to hear about.
And it's my appetite.
No, I haven't. I think that's nice because it's a lot more.
And look, I feel like God,
Just keeping track.
So excited about Rick Steves.
But I think in order for it to get
A little naturally excited about it.
yeah, that's a goal.
Naturally.
I just heard bananas, and that's why I ordered.
Let's see.
I know that.
I go have dinner with
Versus
Chris.
yeah, she sent in this email about this wine thing. Why did I might go?
Oh, just to get it in the store.
Oh, but when you say the international, I
Yeah.
was responding to that. Amazon Center.
Now that I'm looking
When
at this,
in getting our stores, it's really cool.
yeah.
My nephew was
Yeah. We didn't. We've changed the rate today, so that's been.
I know it's
Sure, that's gonna be.
Definitely.
very
Yeah.
My sister says, I tell her, hey, I go to work in the English market anymore. She goes, well, it's much roomier ideas. But it's hard to see her hands.
Well, I have to say that, yeah, it's hard to see everyone else.
let's let anybody who's parking come in. Get this started.
Sounds good. Sure, sure.
Yeah. Krishna? Yeah, yeah. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Yep. Beautiful place. Yeah.
I go flip.
I don't know. I understand. I don't understand.
Oh, no.
So if I sit back here,
No, no,
Oh. Oh, okay, great. Oh, nice.
Oh, they're wonderful. We had a great time helping them get their place together.
That's a lot of work.
it's a little last minute. That'll be nice. No, but Lonnie's friends here in Torben, they know some people from Greenwood that have been over there, so I'm gonna stay with a couple of them. Just travel the islands. I'll probably try to farm a little bit while I'm
I was totally amazed at, what, I've done a lot of building, and I was totally amazed at, I knew being a student wasn't as much how efficient they did, and how well they did, and how quickly they did. And I got there and I went, oh,
It's really nice.
get a bag.
So they'll wind up, you know, at one of the places that I'm here. It's from, and because the very experience is the way to go. So the fact that we just.
I don't know, one of my friends was like,
So
when I actually asked her,
otherwise I would be going unless we have to.
Well, there's a few,
It just went down. And then it'll be dark at night, right?
I haven't seen a lot of
So we'll get there. So
up in Grand Marais.
tie something down before everyone gets there, which is really nice.
How's the placeholder going?
I
Yeah?
will travel there for a little while after this. I'm a little tired. I just unpacked my bags from the last, year. So I don't know, I'm ready to stay one place here. Lay low for a little while. But yeah. So things been down here for that. Yeah. Just plugging away. Jeannie and John are here. It must be, I saw them about 10, 15 minutes ago. They must have some kind of meetings right here. Yeah, because I saw them a while ago.
Right? You guys had a couple of white plates, folks.
Bob, the dog.
Yeah, I'm drawn to one show.
Oh, yeah, we have to talk about all of them. Money will be back for this section. So I think he was.
Welcome to
I kind of
Maintenance
mentioned
Quiz.
something to him. I don't think he quite got there yet. So I think he's gonna try to figure something out.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about
He's
that.
been planning, so.
Yeah, it's cold this year. Windy, windy.
Thanks for coming out tonight, everybody. Lonnie Dupree is going to talk about his book, Life on Ice, 25 Years of Polar Exploration. But first I wanted to tell you just a little bit about the store. You're sitting in the middle of the largest independent bookstore in the Twin Cities, 300,000 books all around you. You can spend $1 in the corner back there and get a bargain book, or you can spend a couple thousand up front at the glass case and go home with a first edition. We have books back to 1754. We've got brand new books and classics and everything in between, so we hope to see you back. We do a lot of events. We're getting into our busy season. On the 1st, Jonathan Odell is going to be here. He's a novelist who wrote The View from Delphi, and he's back with a new novel called The Healing. It's set in the Civil War. It's about a midwife. It's a really interesting novel. We've got 2 coming up around St. Patrick's Day for you, if anybody's Irish. On the 13th, Kevin Fox and Aaron Hart are going to be here. Kevin Fox is a first-time novelist who's written a book called Until the Next Time. It's an Irish romance and sort of ghost story. Aaron Hart is a local writer who's been going back and forth to Ireland for years. She writes a series of mysteries set there. She'll be reading Haunted Ground. And Aaron's husband, Paddy O'Brien, will be here playing the button accordion. So that'll be quite the Irish evening all around. And on the 18th, Nikki Phillips will be here from Ireland. She lives there. She's written a novel called The Liffey Flows On By. She'll be here at 4 o'clock on Sunday the 18th. You can find information on all of our events on our website, petersonprint.com, on our Facebook page, on our Twitter feed, all over the place. But most of all, we hope you'll come back here, because this is where all the best stuff happens. So without any further ado, Lonnie Dupree.
Wow, thanks you guys for coming. A lot of familiar faces here, actually. It's nice, feels like home almost. I've been working on this book for 10 years, and it probably would have never gotten written had I not fallen off a roof and broke both my legs. but it happened as a carpenter all my life, 30 some odd years of pounding nails. I was working on a friend's house. I was up on a tin roof. It rained a little bit, and I was up at the peak. I had some sneakers on. I slipped, and I was going down, and I knew I had a long drop on the other end of the roof there. And I had to kind of plan out how I was going to fall, because it was a long drop. It was about 22 feet into a rock pile there, landscaping around the house. And so I thought, well, I may or may not make it through this fall. So all I think I could think of is I just have to be able to control my land at least, you know, and not land on my head or my back. So I actually turned around as I was slipping off the roof, and I sat my butt. It was putting on metal roof, so I put my butt right down in the middle of one of those channels, and I just slid down there, and I had my knees bent, and I knew I was just going to land. I wanted to land with knees bent on both feet, and I did. I managed to do that, but I messed them up both pretty bad. So here I am, a carpenter at the beginning of May, just the start of, you know, a long winter, and now I'm going to make some money doing construction, and I broke both my legs. So, being a forever optimist, I thought, well, okay, I'm gonna take this opportunity, you know, of being stuck in a wheelchair for a while to pull together all my journals from all my past expeditions, and going from handwritten journals to the computer. And so I spent all summer doing that. And so had that not happened, this book probably wouldn't have been put together yet. The book starts out my life on the farm. I grew up in Centerville, Minnesota, on a little cash crop farm where we raised sweet corn and ate venison and you know, shot ducks and whatever we could do to make a living and to eat and feed the family. And growing up there on the farm, I was able to explore the countryside and kind of got that explorer bug going. And then in the wintertime, when the lakes and stuff froze over, that increased my exploring territory by half again as much. So that really intrigued me, and I explored all the areas around the farm with my brother, and just got hooked on this exploring bug. Well, I took it to a whole nother level as once I graduated high school. I loaded up a 3/4 ton Chevy pickup full of canned goods and drove up to Alaska with my cousin. And we were just going to go up for 3 weeks to just see what was happening up in Alaska. We were thinking, well, we'd go up if things are good, we'll strike it rich, and maybe find some gold and fish some salmon and all that kind of stuff. Well, the 3-week little expedition turned into 3 solid years. I never came home. I went up there 3-week vacation or a little look-see, and I ended up coming back 3 years later to Minnesota. So completely after being up in Alaska, I was completely hooked on the Arctic because I did some traveling by snowshoes up in the Brooks Range, which that story's in here, and nearly being greenhorns in the exploring business, we almost died from dehydration trying to walk out of a Arctic setting into a village, and then ended up going back to Anchorage, and the economy fell out of Alaska and drove back to Minnesota, where I continued to do construction. Since then, '89, did an expedition called the Bering Bridge Expedition to promote peace between the Soviet Union and the United States. That was a joint 12-person team, 6 Soviets, 6 Americans, led by Paul Shirky up in Ely, Minnesota, who runs Wintergreen Adventures. We did that in 1989, and then in 1991-92, a friend of mine, Malcolm Vance, and I loaded up some dogs and dog sledded across Canada's famed Northwest Passage. It was a 3,059-mile journey through 13 Inuit villages during the heart of Canadian winter. It was a really cold expedition because we had 64 days of polar night, and we had like nearly 2 months of below -30 weather, and each day was, camping overnight, and so with our dogs and our tents and stuff. And then after that expedition in 1995 or 1994, after that expedition, I ran dog teams through the closing ceremonies of the Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway, as part of an environmental expedition. And I have to say that of all the expeditions I've done over the years, running a dog team through closing ceremonies of the Winter Olympics was far the most scariest. Because you got 50 million people looking at you on the television. And we had done some training with the sled dogs before we went through the stadium. Because you want to try to get it right? You never know what's going through the heads of those dogs as they're running through that stadium. Because the first time I was going through the stadium just on a training run, I had a cameraman in my sled, and we have to go to the center of the stadium where there's a podium where the King of Norway is going to be, and then we got to swing around and head out the exit. Well, we headed to the podium. The edge of the sled clipped the podium, and I flipped the cameraman out and his camera out into the middle of the stadium, breaking his camera and stuff. So that was number 1 training run, The second time I went through there, the dogs ran right past the podium, never stopped, went up 3 rows of bleachers to get at a guy's hot dog. So I thought, okay, well, the next time we went right through there and everything was fine. But right before we were going through the stadium, they're doing the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and right before they let us go, with the dogs and everything, the guy comes over to me and says, "Don't use your brakes. We got little trolls buried underneath the stadium, under the floor of the stadium there, and you don't want to hook one of them." What? Boom, and we're going, right? Well, you gotta use the brake if you're gonna stop for the King of Norway in the middle, right? So what happened, luckily there wasn't any buried directly underneath the dog sled, but if anybody's seen the closing ceremonies of the Winter Olympics, at the end of the ceremony, all these trolls pop out of basically the floor of the stadium that have been under there the whole ceremony, so no one expected. And of course it was top secret, that no one knew that, to the point where they just told me like a second before I'm taking off. After '94, Winter Olympics. From there we traveled by dog team all the way through Norway, Sweden, Finland, and into Russia. And then we were the expedition's purpose was to carry an environmental message from Norway all the way to Nagano, Japan. And I was just in charge of that dog sled portion up to Murmansk, Russia. That was in '94. In '95, my then wife Kelly Dupree and I, we hiked on an Arctic island called Banks Island up in the Northwest Territories, where we traveled 250 miles, basically from here to the Canadian border in 15 days with backpacks and sled dogs with backpacks on. This is in the summertime. We hiked across the island, the Banks Island. It's home to 70,000 muskox. So the muskox, you know, there wasn't a single day or a single time in that day that you couldn't see muskox just roaming or just eating on the hillsides of the tundra there, and grazing away. And then every now and then you'd see a little pack of wolves run by, you know. And so we did that expedition in 15 days and learned a lot about just traveling over tundra with the dogs, not in the winter, not using sleds, but as pack animals. Because that's what the Inuit used to do when the snow left in the summer months, is put all the gear on the dogs and then hike from place to place. And so we learned a lot about Inuit life that way. After that, in 1995, I began a long planning process of doing the first ever circumnavigation of Greenland. And Greenland at that time was very little was known. You couldn't even come to a bookstore like this and find much material on Greenland. Well, we had to do our research. We ended up going to Denmark to do a lot of that research to learn about what Greenland really was. Well, Greenland is, you know, 1,700 miles long, 700 miles wide, 6,500 miles all the way around. It's got an ice cap about 2 miles thick. There's only about 40,000 people that live on it, primarily in the southwest side of Greenland. Yet you can put 14 Englands inside of this. That's how big it is. Huge, huge. I mean, when you look at the map of Greenland, you know, and it's just this huge monster of a thing, and it makes all the other countries look really small. Well, it's that big. It really is that big. And so we learned as much as we could about Greenland, and then in the course of 5.5 years, we raised money, we trained, and then we did various legs in Greenland. It took us 3 separate legs to go all the way around Greenland using kayak and dog team, totaling 22 months on the trail. That was on the trail. It took us 5.5 years to actually plan it, fund it, and do it. But going around Greenland was a long process because it was all non-motorized. It was 3,000 plus miles by kayak in the south, 3,000 plus miles of dog sledding in the north. And it was just the two of us, only 2 of us on the entire expedition, John Holger from Australia and myself. That was quite an expedition because we learned a lot about climate change on there, because we lived and traveled with the Polar Inuit up in the northwest part of Greenland, and the elders would tell us about how climate change was affecting their lifestyle directly. The ice is getting thinner, people are drowning, falling through thin ice, more storms, raining in the middle of February, all these kind of things that they would talk about extreme climate change. Not just warming, but extreme climate change even in the winter months. So anyways, from Greenland, went on to promote and talk more about climate change and what's going on in the Arctic. So we planned an expedition called the One World Expedition, which was going to be the first ever crossing of the Arctic Ocean sea ice from Canada to the North Pole. And how we would do that, we would pull and paddle whitewater canoes from Canada 500 miles all the way to the North Pole. And so in order to do that, we had to be amphibious. I mean, it wasn't a typical winter expedition where you travel across rock-hard sea ice. And it wasn't, you know, in the summer months like it has here where you can just have a nice leisurely paddle for 600 miles. This was like broken sea ice, moving, shifting stuff that we had to figure out how to cross and get to that North Pole. And we'd use the expedition and the attention it would bring to bring attention to climate change and what's going on up there. And as a result, with the help of our sponsor, Rolex, we raised 68 million people worldwide on what's going on with the Arctic sea ice and basically climate change overall on the planet. After that expedition in 2009, That expedition was in 2006. In 2009, I made a winter expedition to the North Pole, pulling special modified little Kevlar sleds on skis to the pole. That was a very hard personal challenge. It was to commemorate Robert Peary's discovery of the North Pole in 1909. We did it in 2009. And when we left on March 4th, the temperature was minus 58 below zero Fahrenheit. And the sun first came above the horizon at Ellesmere Island that has been absent for the last 5 months. So we just get there at the very cusp of daylight, for the first time. And so the first 2 weeks of that expedition is nothing more than suffering. And then you get past the suffering part, and then you start getting into the groove and getting into the steam and moving forward. And after 2 months, we made it to the North Pole. I'm going to talk a little bit about the most recent expedition, and then we'll go into a couple of chapters here. And I'll just add, I'll get you started on those chapters, and then I'll just start rambling about our experience, and you can follow along with the book. The last 2 seasons, I've been trying, using my polar and Arctic experience, to do a personal challenge of trying to climb Mount McKinley, or Denali in Alaska, which is 20,320 feet, and be the first to solo climb it in the month of January, coldest, darkest time. And I felt I could do it. It's all, I'm not worried about the dark. I've done lots of traveling in polar night, and I'm not worried about the cold temperatures that I was experiencing on for the rest of my Arctic trips. I was more concerned about extreme wind, which you'll experience on Denali in the winter months. And there's a very, very small window that you need about a 3-day window to be able to get to the summit and back in decent weather. And we can't seem to find more than 8 hours of decent weather to get up to the summit in the last couple of years. The first year I went in 2010, I reached an elevation of 17,200 feet, 13 hours travel from the summit, and had to turn around after being stuck in a snow cave for 7 days at 17,000 feet, and managed to make it back down. And then this year I tried again, managed to make it up to 15,200 feet, and stuck in a snow cave for another week, waiting for the weather to improve, to go up, and I couldn't. The weather just kept getting worse and couldn't get back down. So there was a lot of hardship. I was just got off the mountain a little over a month and a half ago. So I haven't been off the trip too long, and I still got the hardship stuck in my mind, so there probably won't be any going back to that. That was a tough trip, and it really got my rear end kicked well on that trip, so I'm going to hang that up for a while and just try to talk a little bit more about the book, and try to get this out and about. So, I want to show you guys some of the stuff that we used in Denali. This is the boots I use on my winter climbs in Denali. This is a double layer boot. It's made in France. It's called the Malay boots, and it's very well insulated boot. It's got a built-in gaiter, and then it's got liner in here that's reflective insulated foam. You can put your feet in, then there's another reflective foam inner boot there. And for a big boot like this, it's pretty light. And of course, when you're climbing up, you want pretty light equipment. And so this boot here is what I used on the last expedition. And a boot like this with crampons is about $1,300. So, but it's a very small price to pay for keeping your toes and keeping you on the terra firma when you're going up the hill. But how we climb mountains, there's a couple different ways of using your crampons. When you're climbing and it's fairly steep, not too steep, but kind of steep, you know, like 40-degree pitch. You can what they call a French flat footing, where you walk like this, kind of like a duck, like that. And then as it gets steeper, you can do a German front point using these big fangs here in the front, where you embed those toe first, where you engage these big points and these intermediate points just behind those big points. And then this one you can do the same. That's if it's really super steep. You're kind of front pointing, it's called. Or you can do a combination, which is an American version, where you front point and duck walk. Front point, duck walk, and switch off. If it gets, sometimes they're steep, you can climb backwards to give your calves a break. So you can step like this, backwards up the hill, which engages all the points of your glutes. So there's many ways of using your crampons. And you would think, you know, yeah, you just walk, you know, but there's a lot of, it's really important that when you're walking you engage all the crampons, not just like the sides of one, because you can kick out and slip. So there's that. And of course, when you're going solo, the only thing that keeps you on the mountain are these and your ice axes. And I got the two ice axes that I used on the trip. And how they're used is if I'm going up a hill, you know, going up this way and the slope is kind of going this way, I want to have this in the cane position with this daggered into the snow on the uphill side of the mountain, and I got it in the self-arrest position. So if I fall, I can dig that point into the snow, lift up on the back, and that stops. That's theoretically neat. No stop. This little adds on the back is if I need to cut steps in a very steep slope where I can rest my feet. You know, I can rest with my feet, rest my legs. Or, you know, I might want to cut steps for a short distance, and so that's what I use there. If it's really steep and I'm really not sure of my footing, I can double ice axe and use my crampons at the same time. So when I'm going up the hill, I got both crampons in, and I got my axes in. And each time I move, I always have 3 points of contact, either both boots and one ice axe, or both ice axes in one boot. Always in the mountain all the time as I'm moving up. So that's how I climb using these. On the back of this axe is a little hammer, and I can pound in snow pickets if I wanted to clip off to a picket, or if I wanted to pound in stakes for my tent or what have you. That's what this is for here. I got a leash on one of these because you know, you don't want to lose both your ice axes. You know, so I always have one on a leash. I have one on a leash, one that I don't have on a leash, and this one I have on a leash because it's the one I use for swinging mostly. And this has a little sharper point on it for really super hard ice. This is more for what they call neve, French kind of not really ice and not really snow, kind of really firm snow. So that's what I use this one for. So that's the tools I use for climbing Denali. And any questions on any of that stuff right now? Yeah.
So what was the weight you were carrying? Your food, your tent, as you're doing this?
Well, for Denali, I start out at 7,800 camp, which is at the base of the mountain, 7,200, and then I ski with a sled up to 11,200 feet, because it's gradual enough, but where I can ski it, but steep enough where I still need like traction skins on the bottom of my skis. And I pull about 200 pounds of gear up to that point. From that point, I place in depots along the way, and then from that point, I put everything in a I put some stuff in a backpack, keep some in a sled. I leave my skis there because I can't go anywhere with skis, and I cramp on with a sled and a backpack up to 14,000 feet, where I then go from there with just the crampons and a backpack up to 17,000, then up to the summit. Well, from 17,000, the only thing I have with me is 13 liters of fluid and a candy bar and a headlight. That's from 17 to the summit of that. No backpack, anything. Back at the snow cave at 17, I figure when I get back there I'll be really depleted and stuff, so I'll have a thermos of hot liquid sitting in the snow cave ready for me, so I can just drink that, have a candy bar, and get in the sack, and wait until morning to recover, and then hit the weather stuff. So, Grant.
When you're carrying a backpack, how heavy is it?
Well, the backpack going up to 17 is about 70 pounds, 70 to 75 pounds. And you're going up what's called the head wall, which is basically blue ice that's at a 45-degree pitch. And so you're pretty exhausted dragging that up there. And you have to climatize way in advance. So before going up Denali, I trained in Colorado on some 13 and 14,000 foot up there to try to climatize. The year before that, I used a hyperbaric chamber where I slept at night in this chamber where I dialed it up. I could sleep at 12,500 feet. And basically it's a big plastic tent that fits over your bed. And it runs a little generator in there, and you sleep in there, and you wake up in the morning like you had way too much to drink. You know, you get out of there, it's like hungover every morning. It got better after a while, and then during the day, I train with a mask to 18,500 feet on a Stairmaster or what have you in the house. So that's what we've done to train for that Denali. Yes.
When you're dealing with temperatures like this, below and that sort of thing for a consistent period of time, how warm can you stay? How cold do you actually get, like shoes and your actual body?
Well, at 58 below, when we traveled at the North Pole for the first week, and then it warmed up to like 45 below. But when it's that cold, you're only capable of working outside about 5 hours. That's about it, because you're completely exhausted, because there is no sitting down for even a few seconds to rest, because you got to be constantly like this, eating your candy bar, doing this, swinging, doing windmills with your hands to get get the blood flowing to your fingers. It's steady. So 5 hours of just doing that, you're exhausted. Let alone dragging a sled and going north. So the worst time on the whole thing is stopping to get a bite. A bite, off the candy bar, or getting some off the thermos, because you know that you're going to freeze for a few minutes, and it also takes a lot of energy to digest that new food and stuff in your stomach. So, like for the next half an hour, you're like, ugh, I'm really cold. But then you warm up, and your body gets more and more acclimated to that after a while, and pretty soon you're skiing in a t-shirt, like minus 30 and sweating. Really, there is. Anyways, so I got some map inserts that go into your books that you can use as a marker if you don't already have some. And if you don't have them, you can just grab them up here later. But I want to bring you to a page in the book, and let's see, my glasses, where are they? The story I want to talk about starts on 2005, page 205. And if you just go down on page 205, about the center of the page, the paragraph starts, "One overcast morning." Okay, I'm going to give you a little introduction into where that story begins. In 2005, Eric Larson and I are trying to make a crossing of the Arctic Ocean to get to the North Pole to talk about climate change. And this is in the summer. We're leaving from Siberia, the Siberian coast. Very dangerous undertaking because the ocean's all chewed up over there. A lot of polar bears. So the story begins on that page. tent is camped on an ice floe. We're 34 miles off the coast of Siberia. We're camped on an ice floe. Around us is open water, all around us. I get up in the morning out of our little tent, and I go outside to go to the bathroom. And on my way back in, I'm walking back in. I sit down in the tent, and no more than sit down on my sleeping bag, I hear this whoosh, 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 and we're just sitting in the tent. And it's a bear. It's a big bear. We could tell he was big because of the sound of the footsteps. And then I see a silhouette of my camera that's sitting on the outside on one of the sleds. The bear swipes it off the sled. And we're just like trying to be really quiet because it's a brother bear out there in the tent. So we wait there and we hear the bear walking. Eric kind of opens up the tent, and as Eric's opening up the tent flap, I'm loading our handgun, and setting it on the sleeping bag next to me. And then I get the flares. I got some flares, which is our first defense against polar bears, to scare them away. You use these flares that send out this flying projectile, and then it makes a sound and then explodes, and it's light, and it's supposed to scare the bears away. And it does a pretty good job of it. Well, this bear, when we looked out, was still dripping wet from swimming the lead to get to our campsite. And I could see he's a great big old bear, because when his fur was draped over his body, you could see the skeletal frame of the bear. Now, when bears reach a certain age, a very old age, they're no longer agile enough to hunt seals. So what they do is they resort to cannibalism. They hunt female bears and the cubs. That's how they live. So very aggressive bears. And so when I looked out of the tent door, there's this bear, and so we fire off a shot. And this bear is probably now from here to the other side of the store. So we fire off a flare, and the bear he didn't even hear it. So we fire off another flare, right over the top of the bear. The bear is just kind of like looking around, like what's going on, like he didn't even hear it, like he was deaf, And then he sits down on his haunches. He just sits on his haunches. Great big bear. And I knew he was an old bear because he was missing all the hair on his face. His face was black, right? All the hair was missing on his face. And we had the tent door pulled open. We fired off another flare, and the bear just sat there. And then he looked like this, and then he looked, and he could see movement inside the tent. Eric and I inside the tent. And when he seen that, I thought immediately, oh, don't come, because he's gonna come. He's coming, And so I took up the handgun and I fired around right between his legs from here to the other side of the room. And he charged the tent. And so he's charging the tent. I know he's coming. It's not a false charge. He's gonna eat us. He's gonna eat us. There's no question. And we're in a tent this big by this big. That's how big our tent is. Ripstop nylon. The bear's coming. I shoot. I hit the bear once in the chest right here. The bear bit at his chest and kept coming. From here to where the chairs are here at the end. I shot him again. He went down on one leg, got back up, charged again from me to you. Shot him once more, came to the front of the door of the tent, fell down in the door of the tent, and shot him once more in the neck. So, this is the very animal that we've gone up there to try to bring attention to save because of climate change. Because when all the ice melts away, these bears are going to go extinct because they need sea ice to be able to hunt seals from. Well, this bear was on his way out because of his age, and he was clearly starving to death. And but still, it was such a traumatic experience that it left us in a state of shock for several days, actually, because we knew that bear would have killed us very quickly, actually, had we not been able to do that. So, we're devastated because we just shot a bear. The whole thing about global warming was just opening up before us. We got this starving bear. Then we get a call on the radio saying, you guys need to get evacuated off the ice immediately because the entire area around you is breaking up 3 weeks earlier than normal. You got 70 miles of open sea between you and Russia, and you're floating on a little pan of ice. And so when you're floating on a little pan of ice in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, you think everything looks like ice, right? Until you get up a little ways and you can see like open ocean. And all we have is little 8-foot boats, right? So the next 9 days we spent on that ice floe floating around that part of the Arctic Ocean waiting for our Russian counterparts to pick us up. Very expensive process that we had budgeted for, but very expensive. So 9 days later we got pulled out of there. But it really brought a lot of attention to climate change on what was going on in that part of the area. The next year we raised enough money to go back for a second try, but we knew from Russia was no longer possible because climate change has already advanced so much on the Russian side that there's no longer sea ice up there at that time of year. So we had to go from the Canadian side and leave from Ellesmere Island, and we made it to the pole the next year. And thanks to big thanks to Rolex that helped fund that project. So that was the polar bear. That was the polar bear story, and there's a little more detail on that in that chapter. But I wanted to bring you to another part in the book, and that is on page 85. And the chapter starts cold, crappy weather. Go figure. This was about our when John Holger from Australia and I were circumnavigating Greenland. And we were traveling on the west coast kayaking. And we were trying to do one of the longest kayak journeys in a single season up that whole west coast. It's about 1,250 miles of kayaking. And we're at about the 700-mile mark, and we are all played up. We want to quit. We want to give up. And we've just started this whole circumnavigation of Greenland, and here we are, we're in our mid-30s, and we're just completely wrung out. We haven't eaten well, we've been in a lot of storms. And we get to this area on the Nusawak Peninsula where we pull up, and we pull up to the shoreline, and we manage to secure enough food to eat that day. We've been eating on like half rations for several days because we just ran short. And so we had one of these skinny cormorants, little birds that we managed to shoot with the 410 the other day that we were able to boil into a little soup to have on the peninsula there. And so while John was kind of setting up the tent and start the cooking, I went up on top of the hill to make a call out to our base camp manager about our position and what we're doing. And as I was climbing that hill, I kept hearing this funny call from a bird, hawk. Didn't quite know what it was. Just kind of squawking up in the rocks up there, and it kind of got my attention. What's going on? I've never heard anything like that. So I climb up to the top of this hill, and here, sitting on a rock, with about 6 feet diameter, 6 feet high, was a raven. And he's just sitting on the rock, and he's got his feathers going like this, and his neck's all puffed out. He's hopping around this rock. And I'm going, wow, that's the oddest thing, So I just kind of watched this raven a little bit. And that raven was flying from one rock to the next, just in front of me, and then finally it flew over to where I was standing next to this big rock. And I noticed that this raven had something tangled around its leg. It was, and with closer inspection, I could see it was a piece of driftwood, maybe about a foot long, inch in diameter, and it was tangled up on his leg with what appeared to be muskox down, or fur from muskox. Muskox in the summer shed a lot of their downy undercoat, and birds love to make nests out of that stuff because it's really super warm and fluffy. And so somehow that raven, maybe in the process of building a nest, had gotten this stick caught around his leg. And so ravens are, as many of you know, very mystical, spiritual creatures in the indigenous world. And John and I, at this point, were about ready to call it quits on the expedition. I was over that raven and I got really close to that raven and he didn't fly away. He could fly with that stick on his leg, but he was having troubles, with that thing on there. But he would get onto that rock, right next to me on that rock, and I was leaning up, getting really close to him, and I said, if you can help us get through this expedition and give us the strength to carry on, I'll take that thing off your leg. Is kind of what I said, it was just, I had nothing to lose. I'm in the middle of nowhere, no one can see me do this. And I'll be darned if that raven just didn't kind of edge a little closer and I was really being quiet and talking in a soft voice. And that raven let me grab him. And I just reached out and grabbed the raven like this, and he pecked at me a little bit. But then I worked on that raven for about 20 minutes trying to get this stick off his leg. So I had my Swiss Army knife, has a little scissors on it, and I'm snipping away at there, being careful not to hurt his leg, I need to back up just a smidgen on that. When I asked the raven, that I would take that off his leg, the raven on top of that flat rock, it was a big round diameter rock, but on the very top it was kind of flat. There were smaller rocks on top of that big rock. And after I asked the raven, if he could help us, the raven actually reached down and picked up a pea-sized little rock, walked it over to me and set it down in front of me, as if to say, I really don't have much to give you other than this little rock. So then I immediately felt bad, about asking him about this big favor. And so I managed to grab the raven, and I got this thing off his leg, and then I, tucked his feather in like you're supposed to do, his wings in, and I let him go. And he went up and he flew around, and he came down and he landed back on the rock that I just released him from. And he was dancing around on the rock, and then just got up and left after that. And I was just like, I'm standing there in complete awe. John's never going to believe this story. Never going to believe it. And so I'm just got this big smile. I'm going down to the camp, and then I just tell John all about it. He goes, yeah, great. And but to this day, every time I see a raven, and we've seen ravens on many times on our rounding of Greenland, it felt like it was our raven, and it was the raven that was keeping us safe on that whole trip. And so as a result, I wrote a story about that raven in this book, and my then wife Kelly Dupree, she wrote a book called The Raven's Gift, which you can pick up in the children's book section as well. And so there you go. That's a couple of the stories out of this book. There's many more like that, and if you'd like me to personalize your books, I'd love to do so. And if you don't have one of these maps that can be inserted into the kind of as a bookmark, feel free to grab one. And and I want to introduce my publisher, Ann Ryan, at the very back there with Keen Editions. She's been a big, huge part of this, making this whole book happen. And then Stevie Plummer here, who's helping me get the book out and just keep me, so I make it to these events on time. And so anyways, I want to thank you all for coming, and please come up here. I'll personalize those books of yours.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I just want to say our grandchildren love children's books.
Oh, good.
So they got that one until they first did it. They really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
That's why I promoted it.
Oh, thanks. And I don't know, is there a table back there, Ann? Okay, I think I'll just go back there, and I got my writing implements here, and I'll bring this. Good to see you. Yeah. short stocky people because we want to be short and stocky to be.
I know.
We're probably gonna get more wind, more cold, and have more exposure to the temperature. So yeah, I think. I have good circulation.
There's a lot, yeah, very rich.
Mary, you read the book from Dorothy. He has his maps printed, yeah, he's had it signed, but also the map. Oh, we just had them printed out. Okay.
What is that?
It's all of his expeditions. It actually is all flags for those up in the campus. So looking for news out so when it arrived, it was like
Reality.
so there it happened to. So, and it's kind of nice to hear. So,
Yeah.
the size, so that it's.
My games make us better and how they can
I want to
change
make
the
sure
world.
it leaves something. I know. If it didn't have photos, and it's so not I'm sure guilty.
I could never really meet my way into that. Maybe I should just do it.
I have lots of ideas that for a very long time I just didn't see them. I just have these other stories.
Yeah.
And I like research.
So that they're not just stories, you've actually researched.
Well, I mean, like the stories was like, if I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to live in historic times or
Right.
in 1999 New York, or I will go out and like read books and look at pictures and everything.
You could read my journals if you want to know what it's like living in
1899.
1899. That
Yeah,
was
that's a long time.
So excited about this, I'm delighted to have that happen.
Why do you